Most people think transformation is supposed to feel loud, like a switch flips. One morning you wake up motivated, disciplined, fearless, suddenly locked in. But that idea is honestly one of the biggest lies sold in self-help culture. Real transformation doesn't announce itself. It doesn't come with fireworks or a hype playlist. Most of the time, it actually feels boring, frustrating, and confusing. Because it's not an event, it's a process. And processes are messy. They don't move in straight lines. You don't just delete an old version of yourself and install a new one like a software update. What actually happens is quieter. Your old habits start feeling wrong before new ones feel natural. Your old mindset stops working, but the new one hasn't fully formed yet. That's why change feels slow. Not because you're doing it wrong, but because your brain is literally renegotiating how it operates. You're unlearning automatic reactions that once kept you safe and replacing them with choices that require awareness. And that takes time. The mistake people make is thinking nothing's happening just because nothing dramatic is visible. But under the surface, something important is shifting. Your internal rules are being rewritten. Your priorities are reorganizing. And even though it feels like you're stuck, you're actually in motion, just not the kind that shows up on the outside yet. Most people don't stay stuck because they're lazy or unmotivated. They stay stuck because their mind is running on old code they didn't even write. A lot of what controls your choices today was installed years ago. Family expectations, early failures, things you heard when you were younger that quietly turned into rules. Stuff like people like me don't succeed, or if I really try and fail, it'll prove something's wrong with me. Those beliefs don't sit in your thoughts, they live deeper, in the background, shaping what feels safe and what feels dangerous. So even when you want change, your brain keeps pulling you back to familiar patterns, not because they're good, but because they're predictable. The mind values certainty more than happiness. That's why you can know exactly what you should do and still not do it. It's not self-sabotage, it's self-protection. Your nervous system is trying to keep you within a version of life it already understands. And the wild part is, most of this happens automatically. You don't wake up choosing these loops. They just run, until awareness interrupts them. Until you realize the problem isn't your effort. It's the invisible beliefs deciding where that effort is allowed to go. Awareness is where everything actually starts, even though it doesn't look impressive from the outside. It's not forcing yourself to change or trying to fix who you are. It's simply noticing what's happening in real time, the patterns, the reactions, the thoughts that show up on autopilot. The moment you catch yourself spiraling, procrastinating, or emotionally checking out, something important has already shifted. You're no longer fully inside the loop. You're observing it, and that observation alone weakens its grip. This is why awareness is a quiet form of rebellion. You're not fighting your mind, you're stepping out of its unconscious control. No pressure, no judgment, just clarity. Most people skip this step because it feels too simple to matter. But this is the exact point where change becomes possible. You can't rewrite a pattern you can't see. And once you start seeing it, really seeing it, the pattern has to adapt. Awareness doesn't demand instant action. It creates space. And in that space, choice finally becomes an option. Here's the part most people never realize. This isn't just mindset talk, it's biology. Your brain isn't some fixed personality container you're stuck with for life. It's adaptive. Every thought you repeat, every reaction you default to, every choice you make under stress is strengthening a specific neural pathway. That's how patterns get locked in. But it also means those patterns can be changed. When you pause instead of reacting, when you question an old belief instead of blindly following it, your brain literally starts rerouting signals. New connections form, old ones weaken. It's slow, but it's real. And the reason it feels uncomfortable is because your brain prefers efficiency over growth. Familiar pathways cost less energy, even if they lead to the same problems. So when you choose differently, even in small ways, your nervous system goes, "This is new. This takes effort." That tension isn't a sign you're failing. It's a sign your brain is updating. Repetition plus emotion is what locks these changes in, not motivation, not willpower. Just showing up, noticing, and choosing again. That's how mental rewiring actually happens, one quiet decision at a time. Discomfort is usually where people assume they're doing something wrong. We're taught that growth should feel empowering, confident, almost exciting. But real change rarely feels like that. Most of the time, it feels awkward, heavy, and unsettling. That's because discomfort shows up when your old identity starts losing control and your new one isn't stable yet. Your ego hates this phase. It was built to keep you safe, not to help you evolve. So it creates doubt, resistance, and that urge to go back to what's familiar. But here's the shift most people miss. Discomfort isn't failure. It's feedback. It's your nervous system adjusting to new internal rules. The unease you feel is the cost of rewiring. If nothing felt uncomfortable, nothing would be changing. Growth doesn't feel like winning at first. It feels like learning to stand on a surface that hasn't fully hardened yet. This is where most people get it backwards. They chase habits, routines, and productivity hacks, hoping those things will magically turn them into someone new. But habits don't stick when they clash with how you see yourself. If deep down you still identify as someone who's inconsistent, overwhelmed, or not that type of person, every new routine feels forced. That's why willpower burns out so fast. Real change starts one layer deeper, at identity. Not who you want to become someday, but who you believe you are right now. The shift happens when your inner language changes from "I'm trying to do this" to "this is who I'm becoming." It's subtle but powerful. You don't force yourself to act disciplined. You start acting from the belief that discipline is part of you. You don't push yourself to communicate better. You see yourself as someone who handles emotions with clarity. When identity leads, habits follow naturally. They stop feeling like chores and start feeling like alignment. You're not performing change anymore, you're expressing it. And that's when consistency stops feeling like effort and starts feeling like integrity. There's a phase in change that almost nobody prepares you for, the in-between. You're not who you used to be, but you're not fully who you're becoming either. Old patterns don't feel right anymore, but the new ones still feel unnatural. So everything feels quiet, awkward, and confusing. You might pull back from people. You might feel less reactive, but also less certain. This isn't you losing yourself. It's your mind rewriting the story it tells about who you are. The problem is, our culture labels this phase as being lost. But you're not lost, you're transitioning. Your brain is dissolving an identity that once kept you safe and building one that fits who you are now. And that takes space. If you try to rush this phase, you end up clinging to old versions of yourself just to feel familiar again. The liminal phase isn't a setback. It's the doorway. Willpower sounds powerful, but it's actually fragile. It works best when life is calm and falls apart the moment stress shows up. That's because willpower tries to overpower your subconscious instead of understanding it. You can't bully your nervous system into change. If a part of you is scared, overwhelmed, or exhausted, forcing discipline just creates more resistance. This is where honesty does what willpower can't. Not brutal self-criticism, real honesty. Admitting what you avoid. Noticing what drains you. Acknowledging fears without shaming yourself for having them. When you stop pretending to be confident and start being accurate about where you actually are, your system relaxes. And a relaxed system is flexible. That's when change sticks. Not because you're pushing harder, but because you're finally working with yourself instead of against yourself. Most people approach self-growth like they're a broken machine that needs fixing. They label parts of themselves as flaws, procrastination, overthinking, emotional shutdown, and try to eliminate them. But that mindset creates an internal war. What if those parts aren't defects, but adaptations? Procrastination often isn't laziness. It's fear wearing a neutral mask. Overthinking isn't weakness. It's a mind that learned to stay alert to survive. When you try to erase these parts, they push back harder. Integration works differently. Instead of fighting these traits, you listen to them. You ask what they're protecting you from. When the brain feels understood instead of attacked, resistance drops. Change becomes cooperative. You're not trying to become someone else. You're allowing every part of you to update its role. And that's when growth stops feeling like self-violence and starts feeling like maturity. Emotional awareness and self-compassion emotions aren't obstacles to growth, they're information. But most of us were taught to either suppress them or let them run the show. Neither works. When emotions get ignored, they don't disappear. They get stored in the body and leak out as anxiety, burnout, or numbness. When they take over, they hijack decisions. Emotional awareness is the middle ground. It's noticing what you feel without judging it or dramatizing it. And self-compassion is what makes that possible. Not the fake everything's fine kind, but the grounded kind that says, of course this feels hard, I'm changing. When your nervous system feels safe, it stops sounding the alarm. And when the alarm quiets down, clarity shows up. You don't need to be harsh with yourself to grow. In fact, kindness speeds the process up. A calm mind adapts faster than a threatened one. That's not softness, that's psychology. Real change rarely happens in big, cinematic moments. It happens in tiny, almost invisible choices you make when no one's watching. The pause before reacting. The decision to tell the truth instead of the convenient lie. Choosing rest instead of pushing past exhaustion just to feel productive. These moments don't feel heroic, which is why people underestimate them. But every micro-choice sends a signal to your brain about who you are becoming. You're not waiting for confidence to act. You're acting in ways that slowly create confidence. This is how identity updates in real time. Not through massive goals, but through consistent alignment. Most people quit because they're looking for evidence too early. They want proof before the process has time to work. But silent change doesn't announce itself. It compounds quietly. And one day you realize you're responding differently, thinking differently, living differently, without forcing it. That's when you know it's real. Your environment is constantly reminding you who you think you are, whether you notice it or not. The people you're around, the content you consume, the spaces you spend time in, all of it reinforces an identity. That's why change feels harder when everything around you is built for the old version of you. It's not about cutting everyone off or running away from your life. It's about being intentional. Small shifts matter. What you listen to when you're alone. Who you feel safest being honest around. Even the physical spaces you associate with rest or stress. When your environment supports the person you're becoming, your brain doesn't have to fight as hard. Identity stops feeling like something you're chasing and starts feeling like something you're living. You don't rely on motivation anymore because your surroundings quietly pull you in the right direction. Growth gets lighter when it's reinforced instead of resisted. Real growth asks for something most people aren't prepared for: letting go. Not just of habits, but of identities, relationships, and versions of yourself that once made sense. And loss doesn't always look dramatic. Sometimes it shows up as grief for who you thought you'd be by now, or sadness for patterns that once protected you. When you start changing, emotions you've avoided for years can surface without warning. That's not regression. That's release. Your system is finally safe enough to process what it couldn't before. Courage in this phase isn't about pushing through the pain. It's about staying present with it, letting it move instead of locking it back up. When emotions are allowed to complete their cycle, they stop controlling you. What feels like breaking down is often your system recalibrating, making room for something more honest to take its place. There's a stretch of growth that feels strangely quiet. No breakthroughs, no big emotions, no obvious progress, just stillness. And this is where most people panic and assume they're stuck. But this silence isn't emptiness, it's reorganization. Beneath the surface, your brain is integrating new patterns, stabilizing a new baseline. Think of it like healing after a deep cut. Once the bleeding stops, it looks like nothing's happening, but repair is underway. If you rush this phase, you reopen old wounds. Stillness is where integration happens, where reactions slow down, clarity sharpens, and your system learns that it's safe to exist without constant noise. Growth doesn't always feel like momentum. Sometimes it feels like calm. And calm isn't the absence of change. It's proof that change is settling in.